Ma'am, are you saying you believe there are armed men on the property? The dispatcher's voice carried clearly through Vanessa Whitmore's phone, and for the first time that evening, every conversation around my smoker went quiet. Mesquite smoke drifted across the yard, thick and sweet, mixing with the smell of brisket bark, cut grass, and the dusty August heat still rising from the gravel. Vanessa stood 20 feet beyond my east fence in pressed white pants and spotless shoes, one hand gripping her phone, the other pointing through the steel gate like she had just discovered a criminal operation instead of 12 grown adults eating barbecue. Yes, she said. There are dozens of suspicious men here, and some of them may be armed. The property owner is refusing to cooperate. I set my tongs beside the cutting board. Behind me, somebody quietly closed the cooler. Nobody panicked. Nobody argued. Ryan Mercer kept slicing brisket like the entire conversation had nothing to do with him. Laura Bennett leaned against the porch rail with a paper plate in one hand, watching Vanessa with the patient expression of someone waiting for a bad decision to finish happening. Daniel Brooks caught my eye from beside the barn. He raised one eyebrow. I shook my head once. Stay out of it. Vanessa had been trying to control my ranch for months, but tonight she had finally found what she thought was the winning move. She had called 911. They're having some kind of unauthorized event, she continued. There are vehicles everywhere. I told them this violates Silver Creek community standards, but he refuses to shut it down. I looked past her toward the little red light glowing above my gate. My security camera was recording everything. Her arrival, her demands, my answer. Every word she was feeding the dispatcher now. Vanessa didn't notice it. She was too busy smiling at me. That smile told me exactly what she believed. In her mind, sirens were already coming to rescue her authority. She covered the phone with one hand. Last chance, Ethan. End the party before the sheriff gets here. A chunk of oak shifted inside the smoker with a dry pop. I wiped barbecue sauce from my thumb and looked at the row of pickups parked along my gravel drive. No marked cruisers. No uniforms. No flashing lights. Just jeans, boots, baseball caps, folding chairs, and people Vanessa had never bothered to know. You might want to wait until they get here, I said. Her smile widened. Oh, I intend to. Vanessa went back to the dispatcher, describing my guess as if she'd stumbled onto something dangerous. What she didn't know was that nearly every person she was reporting to 911 carried a badge for the same county she had just called. Deputies, detectives, supervisors, people I'd worked beside for years. And me? I was Captain Ethan Cole. But that wasn't the part that worried me. Vanessa had just made statements on a recorded emergency call that didn't match what my gate camera had captured. After months of letters, fake violations, threats, and pressure over a piece of land she wanted me to surrender, she'd finally created something I couldn't have created for her, an official record. Then, far beyond the pasture, the first faint siren rolled across the county road. Vanessa straightened her shoulders. I looked at the blinking red camera above the gate and realized she still thought those sirens were coming for me. At 6:30 that morning, the only sounds were cattle shifting beyond the south pasture, boots crunching across gravel, and the old windmill clicking whenever the breeze came down from the ridge. My family had owned those 87 acres for nearly 40 years. Silver Creek estates began beyond my eastern fence, where manicured lawns, stone entrance pillars, and identical mailboxes replaced pasture grass. According to my deed, county parcel map, and survey markers, it was the line where their homeowners association authority stopped. Vanessa knew that because I had shown her the documents twice. Her problem was a narrow access road running along the northeastern edge of my property. Silver Creek Estates was planning another phase of development, and using my road would give construction traffic a shortcut of almost 2 miles. Vanessa called it a community access improvement. I called it what it was, an easement across land they did not own. The first request arrived in a cream envelope with the association logo embossed across the top. They wanted permanent access rights in exchange for what Vanessa described as a generous community consideration. I declined. Instead, 3 days later, I found Vanessa beside my cattle gate holding a clipboard. Her white sport utility vehicle was parked partly on the shoulder, engine humming, air conditioning dripping onto the dust. She told me my barn color violated neighborhood architectural standards. I reminded her that my barn was outside the neighborhood. The following week, I received a notice about my livestock fencing. Then came complaints about my trailer, my pickup, exterior lighting, and noise from equipment before 8 in the morning. Every notice cited Silver Creek rules. Every notice concerned property outside Silver Creek. I started a folder. Not because I expected some dramatic showdown. I scanned every letter and saved every email. I photographed the survey pins. I downloaded fresh copies of the county parcel records. Then I checked the cameras around my gate and barn. Vanessa apparently interpreted my silence differently. She thought I was giving ground. On Thursday afternoon, an email arrived while I was repairing a hinge on the equipment shed. The metallic smell of machine oil clung to my hands as I opened my phone. Vanessa wrote that my continued refusal to cooperate was creating unnecessary conflict with the community. Then came the sentence I read twice. The association reserved the right to take whatever enforcement measures were necessary to protect neighborhood interests. Vanessa wanted my road. She could not make me sign it over. So she had started building a story in which I was not a landowner saying no. I was a problem that needed enforcement. I saved the email, printed a copy, and slipped it into the folder. 72 hours later, Vanessa would stand outside that same fence with emergency dispatch on speaker, convinced she had finally found the enforcement measure that would make me cooperate. I drove an 8-year-old pickup with dust in the wheel wells and a toolbox behind the cab, and most evenings I looked exactly like what I wanted to be on that ranch, a tired man in work boots fixing fences before sunset. Vanessa saw the boots, the faded jeans, and the old truck and apparently filled in the rest herself. She once asked whether I did ranch maintenance professionally. I told her I worked for the county. I had spent 20 years with the county sheriff's department, starting as a deputy when I was 23. I worked patrol, investigations, training, and eventually command. By the time I bought out my brother's share of the ranch, I was Captain Ethan Cole, responsible for people who knew the difference between authority and intimidation because I expected them to. That distinction mattered to me. A badge did not make my property rights stronger than anyone else's. My deed did that. The county records did that. The law did that. I refused to turn a private dispute into a department matter simply because I happened to wear a badge Monday through Friday. Vanessa mistook that restraint for weakness. After I rejected the easement, she began appearing more often. Sometimes I would hear tires grinding against the gravel shoulder and look up to see her white sport utility vehicle idling outside my fence. She photographed my barn. She photographed my trailer. Then the letters became more aggressive. One claimed my exterior lights created a nuisance for Silver Creek residents, even though the nearest house was more than 600 feet from my barn. Another demanded that I submit my fencing for architectural review. I answered each notice the same way. My property was outside association jurisdiction. I attached the parcel map. I attached the survey. I kept the originals. Vanessa never addressed the boundary documents. She simply sent another complaint. Then one Saturday morning, I heard unfamiliar voices near the equipment shed. 2 men wearing shirts from a private security company had entered through a side gate. They were polite when I approached, almost embarrassed. Vanessa had told them the association needed photographs for a compliance inspection. I asked whether she had shown them written authorization to enter my land. I walked them back to the gate, told them they were not in trouble, and asked them not to return without permission. The camera above the barn captured the entire exchange. Just 2 confused contractors leaving private property. By Monday, Vanessa had transformed that into an email accusing me of aggressive behavior toward association personnel. That was when I stopped treating the folder like ordinary neighborhood paperwork. I created a digital archive. Every letter received a date. Every email received a timestamp. Every camera clip was backed up. I added the easement proposal, my written refusal, the county map, and photographs of every survey marker along the eastern line. 1 complaint looks petty. 5 complaints look annoying. Put them beside a rejected land request and a false accusation, and suddenly they begin telling a different story. Vanessa believed she was building pressure. What she was really building was a timeline, and I was quietly saving every piece of it. I created a 1-page index for the archive: date, sender, claim, response, supporting record. Then I compared every notice against the original easement request. The sequence was clean. Before I refused permanent access, no violations. After I refused, complaint after complaint. I also downloaded another certified parcel map and checked for any newly recorded easement or boundary amendment. There was none. If Vanessa eventually forced this dispute into a room with people who cared about evidence, I wanted the story to be readable without me having to decorate it with anger. Before I refused access to my road, I had received exactly 0 complaints from Silver Creek Estates. After I refused, Vanessa managed to discover 7 supposed violations in less than 3 weeks. Lighting, fencing, equipment noise, trailer storage, livestock visibility, vehicle placement, even the color of my barn. I scanned the latest letter, saved it with the others, and closed the laptop. That afternoon, I walked the eastern boundary with a small notebook and my phone. Every few hundred feet, I stopped at a survey marker and photographed it with the surrounding landmarks visible. I wanted a record so simple that nobody could misunderstand it. My land ended here. There. Neighborhood began there. At the northeast corner, I found something new. A small orange construction flag had been pushed into the ground about 12 feet inside my property. Silver Creek Expansion was printed across it in black marker. I did not pull it out. Evidence is more useful before somebody gets a chance to claim it never existed. The next morning, Vanessa sent another email. She said preliminary planning crews might need temporary access near my boundary and asked me not to interfere with authorized community work. Authorized by whom? She did not say. I replied with one sentence telling her that no association employee, contractor, or representative had permission to enter my property. Then I attached the county parcel map again. Her answer arrived 19 minutes later. She accused me of creating an unsafe and hostile environment for community personnel. 2 weeks earlier, I had been an uncooperative neighbor. Now I was becoming dangerous on paper. Vanessa was changing the language because ordinary complaints had failed. If she could not control the land, she could try to control the story about the man who owned it. That evening, I checked every camera around the ranch. The gate camera covered the entrance and county shoulder. The barn camera captured most of the eastern fence. A third camera watched the equipment shed and side gate. I synchronized their clocks, confirmed the storage backups, and tested the audio near the main entrance. I was not setting a trap. I was making sure the truth would have a timestamp. Vanessa gave me another reason less than 24 hours later. A Silver Creek board member named Carol Jensen called my personal number. Her voice was cautious. She told me Vanessa had described me during a board discussion as unstable, confrontational, and potentially threatening. I asked Carol what I had supposedly done. There was a pause. Vanessa had cited the security contractor incident. I looked through my office window toward the barn camera that had recorded those men leaving calmly. Then Carol mentioned the access road. Vanessa had told the board that opening it was necessary for emergency response and neighborhood safety. I thanked Carol, wrote down the time of the call, and added another page to the folder. By then the pattern was impossible to miss. Vanessa did not need me to break a rule. She needed everyone else to believe I was the kind of man who would. And 2 days later, when cars began arriving for my barbecue, she finally saw the crowd. She needed to make that story sound real. Ryan Mercer arrived first in his dark blue pickup with 2 foil pans of smoked ribs balanced on the passenger seat. Detective Laura Bennett came 10 minutes later carrying potato salad and enough sweet tea for a church picnic. Lieutenant Daniel Brooks rolled through the gate behind her, cooler strapped in the bed of his truck, country music playing softly through an open window. Nobody wore a uniform. Nobody arrived in a marked vehicle. By 6:15, 12 of us were eating, laughing, and arguing about whether Ryan had ruined perfectly good ribs with too much sauce. Then Laura glanced toward the eastern fence. "You expecting company?" I followed her eyes. Vanessa's white sport utility vehicle was crawling along the neighborhood road at walking speed. It stopped near my gate. Her window lowered. A phone appeared. She photographed the pickups first, then the people, then my barn. Daniel looked at me. "That the association president?" "That is Vanessa." "The road lady?" Ryan asked. I nodded. Vanessa drove away without speaking. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed on the picnic table. Her message said I was hosting an unauthorized large gathering that violated Silver Creek community standards. Laura asked what it said. "Apparently dinner requires association approval now." Ryan looked around at 87 acres of private ranch and almost laughed. Another message arrived. Vanessa demanded that all vehicles be removed within 30 minutes. I saved both messages. At 6:52, her sport utility vehicle returned. This time she parked on the shoulder and walked directly toward the gate. She stopped outside the fence and surveyed the yard like an inspector arriving at a failed job site. Ethan, this gathering needs to end. I set my plate down. Why? You have excessive vehicles, excessive noise, and an unapproved event adjacent to Silver Creek. Behind me, the only music came from a small speaker barely loud enough to compete with the cicadas. My ranch is not in Silver Creek. Her jaw tightened. Your activities are affecting residents. Which residents? She ignored the question and pointed toward the trucks. Those vehicles need to leave. Ryan took another bite of brisket. Vanessa looked at their work boots, jeans, baseball caps, and sun-faded pickups and saw exactly what she expected to see. Men she believed she could intimidate. If you refuse to cooperate, I will contact law enforcement. I felt Laura glance toward me. I kept my voice level. That is your choice. Vanessa seemed disappointed that I had not argued. She pulled out her phone. You think I am bluffing? No. She stepped several feet away from the gate and began dialing. Vanessa had already supplied the emails, the photographs, the false jurisdiction claims, and the escalating language. Now she was about to add her own voice to the timeline. When the dispatcher answered, Vanessa straightened her shoulders and began describing a dangerous gathering on property she still pretended her association controlled. Vanessa believed the call would finally force me to surrender. None of us interrupted her. For months, she had been trying to create evidence that I was the problem. Now, with every recorded sentence, she was creating evidence of something else. The first siren reached us as a thin electronic wail beyond the pasture, then grew louder as two patrol vehicles turned from the county road onto my gravel entrance. Vanessa lowered her phone and smiled at me like she had just won an argument nobody else knew we were having. Now we will see how cooperative you are, she said. The first patrol vehicle stopped 20 yards inside the gate. Deputy Michael Harris stepped out, followed by Deputy Aaron Price from the second vehicle. I knew both men well. More importantly, both men knew enough to read a scene before believing the loudest person standing in it. Vanessa hurried toward them before either deputy had taken 5 steps. Officers, thank goodness. I am the president of Silver Creek Estates. I am the person who called. Harris glanced toward me, then back to Vanessa. All right, ma'am. Tell me what happened. Vanessa pointed through the gate toward my guests. This man is holding an unauthorized gathering. I told him to shut it down, and he became confrontational. There are suspicious people here, and I believe some may be carrying weapons. Harris followed Vanessa's finger across the yard. His eyes stopped on Ryan first, then Laura, then Daniel. Recognition moved across his face one person at a time. Price saw them too. Vanessa kept talking. I want these people removed before this situation gets worse. Harris finally looked directly at me. Evening, Captain Cole. Vanessa stopped in the middle of a sentence. Her head turned toward me slowly. Captain. Ryan set his plate on the picnic table. Harris gave him a small nod. Deputy Mercer. Then he recognized Laura. Detective Bennett. Daniel lifted his cup slightly. Lieutenant Brooks. Vanessa's face changed with each name. She looked around the yard again. Only now she was seeing details she had ignored before. The posture. The familiar greetings. The way Harris knew people without introductions. They are law enforcement? She asked. Harris kept his tone neutral. Several people present are employees of the county sheriff's department. Vanessa looked at me. And you? I am a captain with the department, I said. But this is my private property, and this is a private dispute. I am not handling your complaint. She immediately changed direction. Well, that does not change what happened. He threatened me. That sentence changed the temperature of the evening more than the sirens had. Laura stopped reaching for her drink. Ryan looked toward the gate camera. Daniel's expression went flat. I stayed where I was. Deputy Harris, I said, because I am involved personally, I want an uninvolved supervisor notified. Preserve the dispatch information and handle this exactly as you would any other call. Harris nodded. Understood. I already told dispatch what happened. Good, I said. Then there will be a recording. For the first time that evening, she seemed to understand that a recorded call worked both ways. Harris began asking where everyone had been standing when the disagreement started. Vanessa pointed toward the gate and repeated that I had approached her aggressively. I said nothing. I simply looked above her shoulder. The small red light on the gate camera blinked in the gathering dusk. Vanessa followed my eyes. She saw it too. And for the first time since I had known her, Vanessa Whitmore had absolutely nothing to say. That camera does not prove anything, she said. but her voice had lost the polished certainty I had heard for months. Deputy Harris did not argue with her. He simply wrote down the camera location and asked whether she would remain available while an uninvolved supervisor responded. 12 minutes later, Sergeant Rebecca Sloan arrived in an unmarked county vehicle. Rebecca knew me professionally, but she had never been part of the property dispute, which was exactly what I wanted. Rebecca spoke to Vanessa first. Vanessa repeated that I had confronted her, intimidated her, and created an unsafe situation. Then Rebecca spoke separately with Ryan, Laura, Daniel, and the other guests. Their accounts matched on the important details. Vanessa had approached the gate. Vanessa had demanded the gathering end. I had remained inside my property. Then Rebecca came to me. "Do you have access to that camera footage?" "Yes." I pulled out my phone and opened the security application. The video began several minutes before Vanessa arrived. There she was, walking toward the gate. There I was, standing inside the fence. The audio was clear enough to hear her demand that I end the gathering and my repeated statement that the ranch was outside Silver Creek jurisdiction. No threat, no aggressive approach, no attempt to follow her. When the clip ended, she asked me to preserve the original file. "Already backed up," I said. Dispatch had preserved Vanessa's emergency call. Her description included dozens of suspicious men, possible weapons, and a property owner refusing lawful community instructions. Rebecca looked across my yard. 12 guests, paper plates, folding chairs, a smoker, private vehicles, nothing resembling the scene Vanessa had described. That was when I went inside and brought out the folder. The easement proposal sat on top. Beneath it was my refusal. Then came the first violation notice, followed by the second, third, and fourth. I showed Rebecca the email claiming Silver Creek could take whatever enforcement measures were necessary. I showed her the photograph of the orange expansion marker 12 feet inside my boundary. Then I showed her the message Vanessa had sent less than an hour before calling emergency dispatch, demanding that I terminate the gathering. Rebecca flipped through the pages slowly. "This is irrelevant," she said. Rebecca looked up. "It establishes context." Vanessa immediately insisted that the association had jurisdiction over activities affecting neighborhood residents. I opened the county parcel map. The eastern property line was marked clearly. "Silver Creek ends here," I said, touching the line. "My ranch begins here." I have sent her this map repeatedly. Rebecca studied it, then looked toward the fence, where one of the survey markers was still visible in the fading light. The easement request, my refusal, the violations, the unauthorized inspection, the language about enforcement, the accusation to the board, and now a recorded emergency call built around claims the camera did not support. Vanessa had spent weeks trying to create a paper trail against me. She had succeeded in creating one. She had simply put the wrong name at the center of it. Rebecca asked me to walk her through the timeline from the beginning, so I did it without skipping dates. First came the easement proposal, then my written refusal. 3 days later came the first violation. After that, the complaints accelerated. Then the security contractors entered without permission. Then Vanessa described me to the board as threatening. Then an expansion marker appeared inside my boundary. Finally came tonight. 2 messages demanding that I end a lawful gathering, followed by an emergency call describing a scene the camera did not show. Rebecca wrote while I spoke. When she finished, she went back through the folder and matched each event to a document or recording. That was the moment the archive stopped looking like a pile of neighborhood arguments. It became a sequence. Motive, escalation, notice, action, contradiction. Vanessa could disagree with my interpretation, but she could not make the dates rearrange themselves. She could not move the survey line with an opinion. She could not erase the dispatch recording by calling it a misunderstanding. And she could not explain why supposed community violations had begun only after I refused the road she wanted. Rebecca closed the folder and told Vanessa the incident would be documented and reviewed through the appropriate channels. I picked up my cold plate of brisket and walked back toward the smoker. Behind me, the gate camera kept blinking red, preserving the quiet little fact Vanessa had overlooked from the beginning. Authority can shape a story for a while, but evidence remembers exactly what happened. Because I was personally involved, I stayed out of the department review. Sergeant Rebecca Sloan handled the documentation, dispatch preserved the emergency call, and the original gate footage remained untouched in secure storage. Vanessa apparently expected my rank to make the problem disappear. Instead, procedure made it harder for her to control. 3 days later, Silver Creek Estates announced an emergency board meeting. Carol Jensen called me that afternoon and asked whether I would attend. I arrived Thursday evening carrying the same folder Vanessa had watched Rebecca close beside my gate. About 30 residents filled the folding chairs. Vanessa sat at the front beneath a Silver Creek Estates sign, wearing the same controlled expression she always used when she believed the room belonged to her. She opened by calling the ranch incident an unfortunate misunderstanding. Then she said the association had acted only to protect community safety. Carol asked when the association had gained jurisdiction over my property. Vanessa said the ranch affected Silver Creek and therefore required reasonable oversight. That was when I placed the county parcel map on the table. I pointed to the eastern boundary. Silver Creek ends at this line. Then I placed the easement proposal beside it. This arrived before the violations started. My written refusal went next. Then the notices. Lighting, fencing, trailer storage, noise, livestock. Vanessa interrupted. Those were legitimate community concerns. I pulled out her email, the one promising whatever enforcement measures were necessary. Another board member asked who authorized the private security contractors to enter my ranch. Vanessa said they were conducting routine compliance work. I placed a still image from the barn camera beside the email. Then came the photograph of the orange Silver Creek expansion marker sitting 12 feet inside my property. A man in the second row raised his hand and said Vanessa had threatened him with fines after he questioned a landscaping contract. A woman near the aisle said she had received warnings for rules she could not find in the governing documents. Another resident asked to see association spending related to legal consultations and expansion planning. She lost control because people stopped looking at me and started looking at the documents. The board voted to commission an independent review of the expansion project, enforcement practices, and money spent pursuing property outside association boundaries. Vanessa was temporarily removed from enforcement decisions while that review was underway. The proposed easement was suspended immediately. Every notice issued against my ranch was withdrawn. A week later, Carol called again. The review had found that Vanessa had repeatedly presented personal decisions as board authority and had pushed contractors toward my boundary without documented permission. The board voted to remove her as president. The folder sat where it had started. Only now every page had done its job. Vanessa had spent months trying to make me look dangerous because I would not surrender a road. In the end, nobody needed my rank to decide who had crossed the line. They only needed to see where the line had been all along. The western sky burned orange behind the pasture, and the old windmill clicked slowly above the cattle as a warm breeze moved through the grass. I had the smoker running again. Mesquite curled from the vent in thin blue. Ribbons, carrying the smell of brisket across the same gravel yard where patrol lights had flashed less than a month earlier. Ryan arrived first, naturally, carrying another pan of ribs and insisting he had corrected his sauce problem. Laura brought sweet tea. Daniel showed up with a cooler and parked beneath the cottonwood beside the barn. No white sport utility vehicle creeping past at 5 miles per hour. No phone camera pointed through my gate. No certified envelope waiting in my mailbox. No orange construction flags appearing inside my property line. Just cedar posts, barbed wire, and the faded survey marker fluttering exactly where it belonged. Silver Creek had formally withdrawn every notice against the ranch. The expansion committee abandoned its attempt to use my road after the independent review confirmed there was no easement giving the association access. The board also adopted a new rule requiring written legal verification before anyone could claim enforcement authority over property outside the recorded association boundary. Vanessa no longer had an office at the clubhouse. She no longer controlled enforcement. The last I heard, she still lived inside Silver Creek Estates, but the clipboard apparently stayed home. I wanted my property left alone. I wanted a line on a county map to mean exactly what it said. Most of all, I wanted the people around me to understand something I had learned long before I became a captain. Authority and power are not the same thing. Power can be performed. It can arrive in an expensive vehicle carrying official-looking letters. It can speak loudly enough that reasonable people begin wondering whether they missed some rule. Real authority has limits. Good authority knows those limits. Around sunset, Ryan stood beside the smoker while I sliced the brisket. Think she will call the department again? I looked at him. Laura heard the question from the picnic table and started laughing before I answered. Daniel shook his head over his cup. I glanced toward the little camera above the gate. Its red indicator still blinked steadily. I think she finally figured out who answers, I said. Ryan nearly dropped his plate laughing. No siren. No flashing lights. Vanessa had spent weeks trying to make me prove how much authority I had. I never needed to. The deed proved where my property began. The survey markers proved where her association ended. The cameras proved what happened at my gate. Her emails proved why the pressure started. Her own recorded call proved how far she was willing to push the story when the facts would not cooperate. Every little detail she had dismissed eventually came back together. The fence, the road, the folder, the camera, even that blinking red light above the gate. She thought justice would arrive with sirens and choose the loudest person standing beside the road. She learned something different. Justice does not need to shout. Sometimes it just keeps the records, waits for the truth to catch up, and lets the right line stay exactly where it was drawn. If an HOA president tried to pressure you into surrendering an easement, then called 911 and exaggerated what was happening on your private property, what would you do first? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy stories where arrogance collides with cameras, property records, and consequences nobody bothered to anticipate, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the strongest response is not revealing your title or shouting louder. It is preserving the email, saving the recording, marking the boundary, and letting the other person create the evidence that finally proves your case.